Hey gang, welcome back to Joe Daddy's Garage. Today's video is part 4 in the Crunchy Cobra Jet series. Now that is the name of this car for a specific reason. It has a lot of rust in it. Currently there are 3 other videos where I detail more of the car itself, so if you're interested, by all means go back and check out those videos after watching this one. Now, you've seen in the other videos I did an overview and I also did some reinforcement to the car, and I set it on the jig that I built out of a boat trailer, and from there the car is back on the lift. I'm going to go over some of the stuff that I plan to do with it and some of the parts that I plan to save. Unfortunately, this car has had, just fallen on hard times overall. There was a lot of rust issues, so most of it is kind of unsalvageable. But there are some parts of the car that I will retain and try to keep as many original parts of the original car on the new build. So let me show you what I have going on and what the plans are moving forward. Here is the Mach 1 sitting on the lift, and again I can go over and point out all of the rust and all that sort of thing, but I've already done that in previous videos. But trust me, it is pretty bad. What we have here is a Dynacorn floor pan. This floor pan is technically the same from 65 to 69 from what I understand. Very little change in this. I would be very comfortable to say 68 and 69, 67, 68, and 69 should be the same. One thing that they do differently on these pans, or based on the original designs, let's say, the cross member that runs underneath here, and if you look at this on this car, you can see how wide it is. On the previous models, the 65 and 6, that is a narrower cross member. So that is one difference in these pans itself. And another thing is the 69 floor pan, even though you really can't tell very well from here, there is a depression right in this area, and then these crossover kind of depressions. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, and like this outer perimeter here. This is a bit different in that it does not have the 4 depressed areas. It has 1, 2, 3, and then it has the pocket behind it where you would have seen a typical hole, which was kind of a jig hole from what I understand of the original floor pans. The 69, it's different. It doesn't have that configuration. Other than that, almost everything is the same overall. Now, the original idea for this was to salvage the main part of the car and basically cut the floor pan out and set it down onto this new floor pan. The more we think about it, and I've talked it over with the owner, the difficulty with doing that is there's still very little that's going to be saved from that body. And cutting that up is not going to get us any further ahead overall. Very little is usable. In fact, I put tape on the pieces that I plan to incorporate into the new structure. So I will salvage the rocker panels, the air box there, even though this one needs a little work at the bottom. I'll fix that, salvage that air box. We're going to try to keep the rear apron and the front apron, if possible, on the passenger or the driver's side, and the shock tower. The frame rail itself is no good. Pretty sure we're going with a different type of suspension. These we would not reuse anyway. They're bent, so those strut rod braces would not be used. The front here, we're going to try to save the core support and this cap that goes on the front of the frame rails. And again, on this side, I will be saving the shock tower and this rear apron. This forward apron, I don't know if I'm going to try to save any of that. It is pretty bad, but I'm going to look at it a little harder and see what comes of it. And then also that air box on this side and that rocker panel. I may try to salvage some other things going to the rear of the car. There is discussion, and I can show you the quarter panel. The bottom half of this one is gone, and there is some rust in the forward section. The upper half of the quarter panels are in good shape. Sorry about the light. So I may be salvaging parts of the original quarter panels, but I can't save the whole thing. In the rear, there's nothing here to save. I mean, you could section the frame rail, but it's all rusted off here at the end, and this one's the same way, rusted up. So surprisingly, those frame rails are in decent shape compared to the rest of the car, but there's no reason to cut those out and try to salvage those. Also, the whole back of the car, tail panel, all that's gone. But with the new floor pan, of course, it has all that stuff already built into it. Now, what I have done, a couple things. You know, I built this jig, and I built mount points that I could isolate the frame rails, and I built this strut. Basically, it comes down and it zeroes out the height. So you have this on the boat trailer, and then this piece goes into what would be the shackle mount. So I know these are in the right location based on my dimensions I took from not only that car, but also the 68 that I used as a template when I built all of this. Moving forward, I have these perches on the shackle mounts or the spring perch mounts in the front. I ran into a little bit of a problem on these. The holes might be off a little, and it was fighting with me to get it to sit in place. What I did is I took a piece of 1-inch square tubing, knowing that I had the jig on a flat plane. I measured from that to various points on the frame rails and found out that I am good. All the numbers are good at this point. What I did is I added on this secondary mount point, and I measured and created a zero measurement, in this case 5.5 inches, exactly the same on both sides. So I'm very happy with that. Moving forward, I have these side supports. Those are going to hold the inner rocker panel in place. And as you can see, I have some other pieces sitting on the assembly. And I'm really excited to show you this because this all is fitting like it was intended. I have these struts here in the front going up to the floor support on both sides. I did find a little variance in those, and that could be as simple as the hole in the original could be slightly different than the hole in this piece. The floor support is not that critical as far as being at a zero location. It could be fore and aft a little bit, and it really wouldn't make much difference because it's just a support. It's not like it's a tolerance measurement. So with that in place, you can see that I have the frame rails pretty much sitting flush inside of the floor supports. I will say this side needs to go up a little bit, and that is actually from a measurement standpoint coming off of the boat jig. I noted this side is sitting a little bit low, and it could have been from being handled at shipping. You know, could have been bumped down some. Other than that, my other pieces that I made, these struts that go into the idler arm location, fits right on the money. The one for the steering box, dead on where it needs to be. I bolted in this cross member piece. It's an absolute perfect. Fits just like it's supposed to. The pieces here, same way. They bolted in just fine. And I did have an issue with the hole in this panel. The threads were messed up. So I did have to tap this one and run the bolt into it, but it bolted up just like it should. My dimensions are where they should be for my end locations as I designed it, and everything else is fitting. Same thing over here. This floor support is sitting down in that channel. So I'm really happy with that. Now, the firewall, again, gaps are good. Things are fitting like they should. I did a test fit with the export brace, and although I do see some variance where the holes actually, where they line up on the firewall is not completely zeroed in. It's just sitting there. In fact, the firewall will go underneath the floor pan. It doesn't sit on top like I have it. It'll be scooped underneath. And that is basically for, water flow. You don't want it to catch on the front edge of your floor pan. You want it to go underneath. So these locations here are really, really close to where they need to be. I'm very happy with that. I did note that there's a gap underneath this location and slightly underneath that location. Now, I will be doing more measuring and cross measuring to make sure all this stuff sits in place like it should. As I pull pieces out of this car, like the core support and this cap, that will also dictate this width. I've already measured this, in fact. I did a cross measurement between the inner frame rail here and over here, and this is exactly the same, this dimension between these two. So I know that this is going to fit like it should. The goal here, again, is once I get all of this kind of in place where it needs to be, I'm going to remove the shock tower. I'm going to pull this piece out. Even though it's in good shape, it's meant to be there, we're going to keep the original ones. They're heavier overall. The bracing that wraps around on the inside, which is on the big block cars, is different than this bracing. I can show you there's a couple, like 3 spot welds here and a weld up here on top. And this one is a bit different. There's got more spot welds in it. I can't really get a good angle on it. There's more spot welds in it and the metal's thicker. So I'm going to use that piece. However, I'm going to keep this piece because actually this one feels heavier than the original. And I found some issues as I was looking at this. This one is bent. You can see it's actually interacting with the lower control arm. And I don't want to take a chance on trying to do something with this just to save it. And also it'd be very complicated to remove that piece. And I'd rather keep what I can here, knowing that it's in the right location, and work my way to the out. So just saying, it'll be different than just bolting or welding these on, but it's going to be part of the process to make this all come together. The other things that I have, if I haven't shown this already, I have both sides of the car. The wheel houses are just screwed onto this structure here. They're not welded in at all, and that is fine. The rest of this looks like it's all in good shape. It's not bent. And then over here, I have the other side and also a full quarter. And the reason we got the full quarter is we want to have the right shape of the quarters at the bottom. This car, the original quarters have a dip. It dips up here at the bottom, kind of like an angle. And so we wanted to replicate that. And you can't get that in getting the quarter skins, or the 80% doesn't work. So that's why we did that. And there may be some stuff going on with these pieces later on, just to let you know. There's a plan, so we're going to have to work on that. Of course, in doing all this, I will be removing the rocker panels and working with the original ones. I know a lot of people have discussed that they try to buy these rocker panels for various cars, and they find that they're too wide. So I will be doing some cross measuring on these pieces to see how they compare to the originals. Otherwise, I do have, this is the upper back panel brace. So we have 2 of those for some reason. And then we also have 2 doors. There is a trunk brace, I think, in that box. And then there's a tail panel and valance panel in that box, and a deck lid in that box. So that's what we're working with. And I'm going to continue on and see what I can get done today. You know, since I accumulate parts, and I tend to hang on to a bunch of stuff, I noticed that I have a core support sitting there. Now that is not for the 69. That I believe is for a 65 or 66. That's what the label says on it. I'm going to get that down and just kind of use it in a way to see how this fits. Now again, this isn't made for this car, or not for this particular car. Let's just see if I can get it anywhere close. Yeah, it's quite a bit different. Probably not going to work. It's a different overall shape up here on top. Well, yeah, it's going to be a fight to do that because this shape on the ends here is completely different. This drops back in and kind of extends the front a little more over the top of. So like the 65 and 6, this area is more flush with this surface here. As you look at the way this is shaped, this box, this is sitting behind the box. Whereas this box here, this is sitting in front of the box. So yeah, it's not even going to get on there because there's just not enough clearance. So I could probably get it to slip over if I didn't have these aprons, but that's the only thing that's not going to work. Okay, I've come to a decision. What I'm going to do here, because this panel needs to be patched up and it has a variety of issues up here at the top, which would mean I would have to cut off the top of this panel to save that panel. And the end result is I'm doing a lot of extra welding and cutting for really no gain. I did measure all of these areas here, so between the front flange and all of these locations for the bolt holes, and they are the same as those up there. So I am happy with what this panel represents. Also, if I were to try to take out the core support and separate these panels, because I don't want to do it all in one shot anyway, then I'm double mutilating everything. It's really hard to save something in this way. So I'm going to cut this off up here, cut this off. The strut rod supports down here, I am going to just cut these off right here. And I will drill out, or maybe cut off this section as well. I'm not sure yet if I want to just cut that off. But the idea is I want to save the core support and this front cap. I'm not worried about this panel. I'm not worried about the frame rails. They're not salvageable anyway. So I'm going to use the Yes Welder plasma cutter. I've used this many times and it's done very well. The only issue I've ever had with this is my power source. So whenever I'm using it, the breaker will get hot and kick off. So I have to kind of take my time and cut a short section and then come back, let it cool down and start over. The thing is that breaker panel, I don't have a dedicated plug-in specifically for this welder. And that's probably the one drawback. Now, it does have a 110, 220. So I guess if I found my adapter, I'm sure I have an adapter somewhere. I do have a 220 dedicated outlet, and that's maybe what I should do in the future. Right now, I just want to get this section cut off and move on from there. So of course, I'll be using hearing protection and some dark shaded goggles and also some leather gloves. And let's make this happen. So that frees up all that upper section, and you know, this box is part of the core support on the inside here, so I want to not damage that. But I'm not worried about these frame rails. There's no value to keeping these. Let me see if I can cut those off. May have to use a different approach on that. Now, well, look at all that. There's a lot of scale in there, but you can see how these inner pieces are meant to be attached. And these were out of place because even the center hole didn't line up. You can see there, it didn't line up. So there was a mistake when they were manufactured. Okay, that's off. That's one of the big steps that I wanted to take or make today. So at this point, what I want to do is separate all those other secondary pieces, and that'll just take some time, get the flanges off for the aprons, and that's just gonna, again, take some grinding and stuff like that. So good step, good step. Okay, now that I have that off, the next step is going to be cleaning up all of the metal that I don't need. So the rest of the frame rails, this piece that was the passenger side apron, and of course this flange, and same thing on the driver's side. Eliminate all of that. And I did notice something a little different here. I have not seen this before. There's a bit of weld there. So I guess I would assume they did that at the factory, but I don't remember seeing that before on other Mustangs. I could be wrong, but I mean, there may be some over here. It's kind of hard to tell with the rust. So I'm going to work on getting that loose. That'll involve drilling out some holes, or some welds here on the bottom. Of course, eliminating the edge weld here. If you'll notice, they burn through right there when they welded this. You can see it inside where those holes are. So they were aggressive in the welding, I guess. Or maybe those holes were meant to be there. I don't think so. No, because there's 4 holes here and just 1 here. And of course, get rid of this other piece as well. So I'll progress through that and show you how it turns out. I don't know if I need to film all of that, but basically grinding and drilling and all that fun stuff. These welds, I know on this side, they were really compressed deep. In fact, there's like humps on the opposite side from the welder. Same way here. This is all distorted. It's very wavy. So it makes it a challenge when you're using this little belt sander to try to get into that space. And of course, this is very rusty. So I got to be careful I don't get too carried away and burn my way through it. This side only had like 2 good spot welds, and that side they had put in like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So only 2 actually held this together on this side. Now I'll say this was the hardest thing to get out on that side. I mean on either side, but that was the hardest part to get this apart. These spot welds, really hard to get into at these angles. I ended up cutting this into smaller and smaller pieces. So like this was right here, in there, and I just kept on getting it, you know, smaller. Actually, it was like this. I take that back. It was like that. So there's 3 on the bottom, and then the ones up here actually attached to the inside of this flange. So yeah, I just kind of whittled it down basically. Sometimes that's all you can do. Just kind of work the pieces smaller and smaller until you can gain access to other areas. So I have the holes drilled out on that side, and again, it's just going to be slicing it, making it smaller. And then on this section here, what I ended up doing was I took my tool and I worked this flange, whoops, wrong hand, worked this flange over some. Try to create a gap in there, and then I come in next to it. I don't want to cut into the main piece. I want to go against that piece. Takes a variety of tools and techniques to get in there. You want to make sure you don't do too much and then end up cutting some of the other parts. So okay, all right. Let's see if we can make it fit. There we go. Let's see. Okay. Keep that handy. All right, that's the same measurement. Now, of course, none of this is been squared out other than what's on the jig. There's still a lot of play in these areas. You can move this stuff around a little bit. It was more play up here, but now that that's locked in, I will probably attempt to do some sort of crisscross measuring. The difficulty is a lot of these may not actually be a square representation. Like, I know in certain cars with the battery box and the line for the fender can be, it looks like it's different, can be offset slightly, so you got to be careful where you measure from. At this point, I can just do a rough, just to see what we end up with. I'll pull off the corner back there, come up to the center of, if I can get that to hang on, the center of, let's say, all right, it's hard to do by yourself. We're going to say, you know, somewhere in the range of 61 1/4, I think. You know, it's really hard to say because these holes don't line up exactly. Over here. Huh. Okay. Basically, we're at 61 1/4. So maybe it's more square than I had anticipated. Good. There will be some tuning that has to happen. Obviously, this hole at the front here would be correct in the core support versus how it is in this apron piece. So that can be modified. This side, it's very close, but still not exactly the same. So there'll be a lot more measuring going on to make sure everything lines up. But at least I can say we've started on it and have some success. And I got a mess to clean up, as usual. Well, we're started. Got some things moving. Took a while to separate all the metal from that core support, and there are some variables that come into play, obviously, as I showed you with the holes, but overall I'm pretty happy with the results. I will have to do some repair work to this core support to get it back to where it needs to be, but that's one original part that's still on the car, and that's kind of the goal, is to try to keep as many original pieces as possible. I will go into more detail on the next video with the shock towers, probably. We'll see how that goes. I've talked with the owner, and we're going to address it a little bit differently than I had anticipated or what I had said previously in the video, which is fine. I think the idea is better and will make for a better end result. So that's it for this video. If you would, leave a thumbs up and a comment, and until next time, take care of yourselves. See ya. Card, the Studebaker. Got it?